I love my daddy, my superhero.
Torture, human trafficking, or genocide. He's not loyal to a flag or a country or any set of ideals. He trades blood for money.
Serana and Frea. These two ladies are the main companions for the Dragonborn in their respective DLCs, Dawnguard and Dragonborn, and yet they couldn't be more different. Serana has the whole tall, dark and vampire thing going on, while Frea, who's also tall, is bright in her design and even has restoration spells, something pretty anti-vampire. Serana is, or rather was, a loner with a family that treated her like a tool, and a father who saw her as nothing but a blood donation. Frea is part of a tribe. The tribe is her everything, with a father who is, or rather was, a great mentor for her. These two are narrative opposites, but we don't care about that today. Shove that script out of the window, because today we're looking at which of these women would win in a fight, according to the lore. As with my other videos in the Versus series, which now has a playlist, we'll be looking at what feats they have accomplished, what we know about their abilities, lore-wise, and if a writer were to write this fight, which of the two's victory would make more sense, narratively. I've seen a few people ask if I can show the fights, but the game, Skyrim, doesn't necessarily translate its lore accurately, and my game's heavily modded so it's been tampered with, but you know what, why not? For the spectacle. Serana vs Frea in the Apostasy mod list, go!
Hold on, did you hear something? Where'd you go? No one here now.
Huh. I guess it's time to work out if this is lore accurate. So, Serana vs Frea. While looking at the Elder Scrolls' lore, who would win?
As shaman of the Ska, I am charged with the spiritual well-being of my people.
My name is Serana. Were you sent to wake me?
So before we get into a fight, we need to look at the best of what these leading ladies have managed to accomplish and what they bring to the table. Let's start with Frea, because it's a bit more ambiguous with her. We know that she's a Nord, used to the cold, and the best warrior among the Skal, known to be a hardy people, although they aren't particularly known for their warriors. Still, when it comes to having an axe in her hand, she's the best among them, since she's literally the only one who goes out to try and bring their people back. What's more remarkable about her is her competency with magic, being able to replace her late father as their shaman pretty much as soon as he passes. We know that she's probably not quite as knowledgeable as her father, since he's pretty old by Dragonborn, and still holds the mantle rather than passing it on and retiring, but the game does give us a good idea of how powerful a mage she actually is with this spell, Ebony Flesh. At higher level scaling, Ebony Flesh is a go-to spell in Frea's arsenal, and if we tell Jazago that we know expert level destruction spells, he metaphorically shites his pants and he's as arrogant as anything. This would theoretically put her in a tier just below the likes of Tolfdir in alteration magic, since he's meant to be a master and gives us the master spells. Yet what makes this most impressive is that alteration magic isn't Frea's whole deal. She's also an adept in restoration and dual wields axes. Given that she seems to be a young woman, who's more than likely somewhere in her 20s, you could argue that she's well on her way to being one of the best alteration mages around, in terms of the level of magic she can cast, and that's not even a main thing. It's a testament to her talent, as well as her being one of the few NPCs that can infinitely level with the Dragonborn. Now, does that mean she has unlimited potential? No. I think Bethesda added this in with the idea that people doing Dragonborn for the first time might have been doing it on long playthroughs with very high leveled characters and wanted to have Frea be able to keep up easily. This doesn't mean she's anywhere near as powerful as us. The thing is, looking at Frea's upper limit seems to be a problem with her. We know she has the tools and capability to resist Marak's mind control, making her own amulet to do so, and we also know that Marak's cultists don't stand a chance against her. She holds her own easily when going through Marak's temple with us, battling through Draga, cultists, and even this unique enemy, the Guardian, who is probably meant to be on par with the stronger Draga units, think your Death Lords, that kind of thing. While we do the heavy lifting here, or at least we're meant to, Frea seems pretty confident throughout, and given her proficiency with magic, and her status as the best warrior among the Skull, I think it's safe to assume that if we put her in any Nordic ruin, without a dragon priest at the end, or some sort of other super powerful unique enemy, like Red Eagle, she'd probably more than likely clear it without many issues. I think she could beat the Pale Lady. Her kit is also quite conducive to endurance, and longer battles or long dungeon raids. Ebony flesh would make her extremely durable. She can heal herself with some pretty strong restoration spells, such as close wounds, the same that the Ebony Warrior uses, and she's a hell of a warrior. She's definitely among the most capable warriors that we meet in the game, arguably on par or even better than the members of the Circle of the Companions. Actually, I'd argue above on average considering Skjor's poor showing and the fact that Kodlak's an old man, and she'd probably flatten the likes of Uthgard, Mjolnir, Benel, and pretty much all the mercenaries because of her versatility. And this is the key thing. Frea is incredibly versatile, except for her lack of ranged options, with the magical kit to be tough as nails and hard to put down. She grew up in a very hardy environment, surviving harsh winters and no doubt issues from Reeklings, Reavers, and the local wildlife. Frea says as much if you talk to her, with the weather being the thing that claimed her mother, and with her being trained in the art of war by the former chief, Scaff the Giant, who isn't actually a giant I think, and the arcane arts by her father, the shaman, it's clear that someone with talent has had the right environment to cultivate that talent into quite a fearsome warrior. Her only real flaw is her experience and age, since she's seemingly quite young and isn't particularly well travelled, but her kit, versatility and potential in the levelling side make her probably the best companion in Skyrim from a gameplay perspective. This translates to some capacity in the lore. She's definitely a top tier mortal warrior, but let's look at what everyone's favourite vampire, Serana, is cooking with.
It's pointless and vague, like all prophecies. The part he latched onto said that vampires would no longer need to fear the sun.
Serana is not just a vampire, but a pure-blooded daughter of Coldharbour, and by default that makes her one of the most powerful vampires in all of Skyrim. Oh, and for now we're looking at Vampire Serana. The human Serana is another topic which we'll mention later. On top of that, she's a powerful mage, specialising in conjuration and destruction, being adept level at both when we look at her spell list. She also has some vampiric powers, usually using the Drain ability, and while she doesn't have access to a lot of the things we do when we get her or her father's blood, like the Vampire Lord transformation and vampiric grip, I think it's safe to say that she has access to a lot of this. She literally gives us those powers, and we can use it right away, so why wouldn't she have access to this? Bethesda does tend to keep Skyrim's followers' kits reasonably simple, and I think this is one of those cases where Serana is more capable in lore compared to her in-game iteration. I also think there are bits in Dawnguard's story where Serana displays some knowledge beyond adept level magic, demonstrating this when she's able to replicate her mother's work to enter the Soul Cairn. Although, since she did alchemy with her mother, and she's the source of most of Serana's magic, I wouldn't be surprised if most of her kit isn't seen because it has non-combat uses. Despite this, Serana can still throw hands at close range, preferring a dagger, although in-game she pretty much never uses that dagger. She's probably competent with a weapon, but not exactly mind-blowing as a warrior, which makes sense because she's predominantly a mage anyway. Still, despite being a mage type, she's weirdly really strong. I imagine this is part of her vampiric blood, since I didn't see a gym in Castle Volgar, and the evidence for this is this scene. She literally just picks up Verther, a whole ass mer, in his armour, by his collar, with no effort, like she's asking him for lunch money. Seriously, what does he weigh to her, like a bag of grapes? I couldn't do that. Could you do that? Now that's not even the most impressive thing in this sequence. Serana also shows crazy durability just before it. Vertha does a Vegeta and blows up their chapel you're in, causing the ceiling to come crashing down and a bunch of things to go flying. Now, I've gone over another video talking about how powerful the Dragonborn is, and if you've watched that or know that, then you're probably surprised to find that A, we're even on the floor to begin with, and B, that Serana is on her feet before us perfectly fine, fundamentally unbothered. This guy blew up a building and dropped a ceiling on her. There's not even a scratch. Again, this is probably down to her vampire blood, although maybe she's just built like that. She is a Nord after all. What we have with Serana compared to Frea is a lot more context for her abilities and her upper limits. Fully so though, Serana managed to travel from Castle Volkihar to Fort Dawnguard, if you side with the Dawnguard anyway, which is an absolutely mental journey, because they're literally on the other side of the in-game map. Obviously, Skyrim in the lore is way bigger. I've seen a lot of people try and compare Skyrim to real-world countries in terms of size. I think Italy and Poland were two comparisons, so that maybe gives you some context as to how far Serana managed to travel. If you're American, it's like, I don't know, walking across Colorado. Italy and Colorado are kind of similar in size, maybe that helps you guys. We're getting off topic. What matters is that she survived a journey across a country that's exceedingly dangerous during the time of Skyrim itself. She no doubt faced bandits, trolls, spiders, wolves, bears, and maybe even had a run-in with a dragon at some point. She ends up surviving 2 separate dragon encounters at the very least, one with Durnevir, an exceedingly powerful dragon, and one with these 2 chuckle nuggets in the Forgotten Vale, despite being weak to fire as a vampire. Now I say survive because of a character that Serana is pretty comparable to, her mother Valerica. Both have the same level cap. Valerica taught Serana a lot of what she knows, and the pair are essentially the same kind of being. We know from Valerica that both she and Serana are weaker than Harkon, and that she claims she didn't stand a chance against Durnevir. I mean, we're the Dragonborn, of course we slew the dragon for her. These statements are more than likely applicable to Serana as well, who you could argue is a less knowledgeable version of her mother. Then again, with her adventures with the Dragonborn, she likely has more battle experience than Mother Dearest here. So maybe it evens out, but I'd still claim that Valerica's more powerful, especially because of how long she survived in the Soul Cairn for. Long story short, we know that Serana is weaker than Durnevir and her father, Harkon, who we discuss in detail in his battle against the Ebony Warrior, which did not go well for him. But who can she beat? Well, she survives the Soul Cairn, her entire stint across Skyrim solo, and the long jaunt through Darkfall Cave and the Forgotten Vale. The last example shows her endurance, which, again, is probably a pure-blood vampire property, although Lydia can carry a bunch of dragon bones from Solitude to Riften, so maybe it's a Nord thing. Another thing to note is the dragon bones in Valerica's lab. She just has those, and while these could be those that she just dug up, there is a possibility that she slew a dragon herself, depending on how old you think she is. Dragons have been active, or at least in hiding, throughout all the ages of Tamriel's history, and while I lean towards Valerica digging those up herself, I do think it is a good estimation for both her and Serana, being able to best a lesser and maybe even average dragon on her own, but being no match for the bigger boys, like Odahviing, Paarthurnax, and the ancient Numinex. Valerica herself survived for thousands of years against the ideal masters, and when all was said and done was able to waltz out when the portal was open and Harkon was dealt with. Aside from Durnevir, most of the Soul Cairn is a doddle for her. So if Serana is comparable or maybe just slightly weaker than her mother, she can tangle with some pretty powerful foes. That then leads us to the question, in lore, who would win out of Vampire Serana and Frea?
Nobody's ever asked me that before. Given how I've lived, what I've done, I can't ask the gods for a blessing like that.
I usually find some scenario in which these two characters could actually fight, but as both are allies of the Dragonborn, don't have any interactions, and have no real reason to fight, this would probably be a sparring match at best. Still, we'll assume that they're tryharding, and for that we'll use all their tools to win. One problem that Frea faces is that she lacks the main tools to exploit Serana's weakness, which essentially is any kind of fire or sun damage. If she learned from Isran or someone like that, Freya's affinity for restoration magic would translate to knowing sun magic really quickly, but this isn't the case in game. Both are pretty durable, with Serana surviving an explosion big enough to collapse a building without any scratches, and Frea has Ebony Flesh, an expert level spell. She also has pretty good armor by default, although apparently she prefers light armor, but we see her wearing Nordic carved armor which is heavy, so do with that what you will. Both have admirable endurance, with Serana being undead and going through the entire Forgotten Vale non-stop in one go, while Frea is used to living in really harsh environments. The thing is, Serana is a superhuman. She is a pure-blooded vampire. Her curse, gift, whatever you want to call it, came at the expense of 1,000 souls sacrificed by her father. It's a lot to give for something. Frea is essentially an extremely talented mortal. I sort of see her as pure potential. Remember, the woman we meet is still quite raw, someone still in training who has to take over before her time. And while I think if she went around Skyrim with the Dragonborn for a few years, learning, since she's clearly a sponge when it comes to learning, she would be truly exceptional. But at the moment, Serana is a step too far. If there's a corpse to revive in this fight, and an actually useful corpse, not just some dead farmer, it becomes a 2 versus 1 battle, and while Frea has the spells to keep herself going, especially with Ebony Flesh and her healing, Serana's status as a pure-blooded vampire should be too much to bear. Frea probably keeps up in the strength department, but she is far more reliant on strength than Serana. And while she's certainly more skilled with weapons, getting close to someone spamming frost and lightning spells is going to be tough going if we factor in Serana's superhuman physical capabilities and her vampiric powers on top of it, which should be a lot more impressive in the lore compared to what we see in game. Now again, this is a lore discussion, and you can't tell me Serana doesn't have access to all of this when we do after she bites us. I also once again want to go back to Serana's durability, because it is incredible. Vertha blows the entire roof of the building in a desperate attempt to destroy Serana and us. Of course, John Skyrim survives. Dragonborns in general are extraordinarily durable, and John Skyrim is perhaps the most durable of the bunch, but Serana also doesn't care at all about that explosion. Like, at all. And this is after fighting waves and waves of Falmer that Vertha thought would be enough. Perhaps a fight in daytime could weaken Serana enough to make the fight fairer, but I don't think this is enough to make up the difference, especially because while Serana is weakened by the sun, daylight seems like a minor inconvenience compared to a debilitating weakness. She's about as affected by it as an Irishman. Sorry Ireland. Now, Serana's powers came straight from Molag Bal himself. She's borderline a demigod in a way, or probably more accurately like a 2% god, having the blood of a Daedric prince in her veins, kind of. It was Molag Bal's blood that made the first vampire, but that's besides the point. Frea is an extremely talented mortal who, with time to learn and train, could become one of the greatest warriors in Skyrim and Solstheim, reflected in her infinite leveling, but has to get close and doesn't have ways to exploit a vampire's weakness to make up the difference in in-lore power. At least in my opinion. In a vanilla Skyrim, sure, she would win. She infinitely levels, she's the most competent companion in the game. But, in lore, she loses to Serana. But this isn't the only version of Serana we get. How would this fight go with a human Serana?
It looks like there is only one way to proceed. I leave the honor of pulling that handle to you. I do not want to put my hand anywhere near the mouth of that statue.
There are so many question marks with a human Serana. From a gameplay perspective, she's basically the same, and I'm pretty sure she still has the Vampire Drain spell as well, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. While we don't feel this from a gameplay perspective all that much, probably because we're Dragonborn and little is more powerful than that, being a pure blood vampire is a significant power boost for a mortal. Regular vampire blood can give an injured mortal strength and vitality, and the Grey Prince, effectively a Dhampir, although Elder Scrolls doesn't use this term, was known to have unnatural fighting skills, which included increased speed. And his father doesn't seem like a pure blood vampire. Serana is, or in this case was, so a human form should be a lot weaker. I'm willing to bet she probably ends up a lot physically weaker, giving Frea a clear strength advantage, and is likely not as quick, nimble or durable. She is still an effective mage with her ice and storm spells, still has all that experience adventuring with the Dragonborn, but her physical attributes should drop dramatically without Molag Bal's blood. On top of that, she loses the variety she would have in the lore if Todd and his crew decided to give her the same vampire abilities they gave us. It's a bit of a shame that, but the question then becomes, can this much weaker version of Serana beat Frea? And I'm not so sure. Serana's durability now comes into question, as does her endurance, which gives Frea both those advantages. Sure, Serana still has an advantage at range, but with fewer tools to keep Frea back without her vampiric magic, the potency of her spells likely decreasing without her vampiric buffs, and less room for error because her physical attributes weren't what they were, it's gonna be an uphill battle. Frea theoretically has an even easier time getting in close because Serana would be slower, and at close range, which is Frea's forte, it's probably going to get ugly quickly for the former daughter of Coldharbour. I still think, with her spells and experience with the Dragonborn, that Serana would make it a close fight, especially if there's a decent body to revive, but Frea is a remarkable warrior who has shown she can deal with mage types, such as the cultists. Serana theoretically no longer possesses the power advantage she once had over Frea. In her vampire iteration, she should be a tier above, but in her human form, they're probably in a similar tier, but is a bit of a bad matchup for her, and Frea is more geared to fighting specifically, so she would eventually have to concede to the Scar's new shaman. Now, both these scenarios assume that the fight is on a relatively even playing field, since being in a small room would obviously help Frea, while being in a larger area without cover, like a field for instance, would suit Serana. But based on what I know about these characters, this is how I see such a fight going. Or rather, this is how I would write that fight. Serana doesn't really get to show off a lot of her powers in gameplay, and Frea's in-game iteration is very flattering to her, allowing her to indefinitely level. It's a case where Frea's gameplay paints a picture of someone who could take on the Ebony Warrior, since she would also be at level 81. And unlike J'zargo, who just spams sparks all the time, if you give her good enough gear, Frea could probably beat the Ebony Warrior. But in lore, that fight is very one-sided. The Ebony Warrior is on a completely different level. For all of Frea's talents, and she is remarkably talented, she is also a reasonably regular mortal. I think I'd put her in a tier with some faction leaders. I think she could probably beat like Delphine Codlac and Isran for instance, and I reckon in a straight fight she'd also beat Astrid. But she's not dealing with the big threats, whereas Vampire Serana probably could. She probably could beat a dragon, at least a weaker one, and shows that she can survive encounters with much stronger opponents, like with Dunavir and her father. Sure, she gets carried by John Skyrim, but who doesn't? Anyway, this is a really long outro, so let me know if you agree with my lore assessment, but do try to keep it friendly. And remember, we're not talking about gameplay here, we're talking about the lore. The lore. Lore. Not gameplay. Frea as a follower would win almost any fight provided you gave everyone equal-ish equipment. Now, is there anyone else you want to see me do a versus battle with? I thought the hero of Kvarch versus Pelennor Whitestrike could be a good one, since they're both the Divine Crusader at different times, but you can let me know by doing the whole YouTube ritual of liking, commenting and subscribing, and hopefully I'll see you in another video later down the line.
When darkness